Hi, welcome back. We're in Lecture 2 of Statistics 1. The topic of this lecture is correlational research. So in Lecture 1, we talked about experimental research, and I made the argument about how powerful experimental research is because it allows us to make strong claims about causality. Correlational research is the opposite. In fact, it gets sort of a bad rap because the famous quote that everybody knows about correlational research is that correlation does not imply causation. Indeed, we can't make strong causal arguments like we can from experimental research with correlational research. That's not to say that correlational research doesn't have its place or isn't powerful. In fact, it's very powerful, and we've learned a lot from correlational research, particularly in the social sciences. And those are the examples I'm going to show you in this lecture. So this lecture is broken down into 3 segments. The first segment, I'll talk about personality research and how much we've learned in terms of correlational research and personality. The second segment is on intelligence research. And again, we've learned a lot about the structure of human intelligence based on correlational research. And then I'll talk about correlational research that sort of looks like experimental research, and that's research that involves what I call quasi-independent variables. And I'll use an example of medical research there. I'll talk about sports-related concussion. But in this first segment, let's talk about personality research. In personality research, in psychology, there's this famous quote from Harvard psychologist Steven Pinker, who said, "As any parent of more than one child knows, children are not indistinguishable lumps of raw material waiting to be shaped. They are little people born with little personalities." In other words, he's arguing there's something that might be innate, or at least a very hard-grained trait, such as personality. So here's an example of a baby who is clearly very extroverted, very fun-seeking, clearly not shy, introverted, probably not very neurotic. Okay? And these things can be measured from very early on. And how do we measure them, and how do we test that idea of Pinker's, that there are different personalities in different kids and that they're relatively stable over time? Well, it's hard to do experimental research on this. We can do experimental research to try and prime people to be more introverted or to be more extroverted. But to look at people's sort of stable trait-like qualities over time, it's easier to just do correlational research. So first, let me be clear about what I mean about a personality trait. So traits are considered to be relatively stable, distinguishable qualities of a person, and stable over the course of a lifetime. In personality psychology, the dominant theory in personality research is known as the Big 5 personality model. So there's 5 different personality traits that seem to emerge as you look for correlations across people. So there's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And a lot of people use this acronym OCEAN to remember that. So it's the Big 5 theory, or known as the OCEAN theory of personality. Now, how do we study this? One of the most popular ways to study this is just to administer surveys. So ask people questions like, "I am the life of the party. Is that true for you, or is that not true for you?" I'm going to give you a scale, like from 1 to 7. How much do you agree or disagree with that statement? So if you think back to that picture of the little kid, that little kid grown up now would probably be, "Yeah, I strongly agree. I am typically the life of the party." Or the second question, "I don't mind being the center of attention." Looked like that kid didn't mind being the center of attention, right? And as a grown-up, that kid probably doesn't mind being the center of attention. This is what the personalities surveys online typically look like. So there are a series of questions like that. So this first one is, "I am the life of the party," and you're just asked to strongly disagree or strongly agree, or maybe you're somewhere in between. Maybe you're a little ambivalent on that question. And there are lots of different kinds of questions. I feel little concern for others. That would be low on conscientiousness. I'm always prepared. I tend to manipulate others to get my way. I don't like some of these people. I get stressed out easily, and so on. Okay? What we can do is take people's responses to those questions, and then we can look for correlations across those questions. So if I take the question, I am the life of the party, and I don't mind being the center of attention, those two questions, if I asked hundreds of people, people's responses to those two questions should be correlated, such that if I score high on one of them, say, this is, I am the life of the party, and say I score high on that one, then chances are you're going to score high on this question that says, I don't mind being the center of attention. So that would be this, people represented by that dot are high on each question. They score a 5. I strongly agree that I am the life of the party, and I strongly agree that I don't mind being the center of attention. So that's why these dots here along this line are larger than the dots that are off of the line, like this dot, or harder to see even this dot, because so few people are low on one score and high on the other. So it'd be very rare, for example, for someone to score right here, which is, yes, I'm very high on I'm the life of the party, but no, I don't like to be the center of attention. That doesn't make much sense. So that's why those dots are much smaller. Very few people land there if we do these types of surveys. It's more common that they land along this line, which indicates a strong positive correlation. We'll get into correlations in more detail next week, and there's an entire lecture on correlations. But the point of this slide is just to show that there's a strong positive correlation among those types of questions in personality surveys, and years of research, not just on surveys, but using the surveys correlated with observations of behavior and people's reports about others' behavior, their friends, their family members, support this idea that there are stable personality traits consistent with the Big Five model. Here's just the same slide with what's known as the regression line thrown in. We'll get to the details of that when we cover correlation regression next week. So this theory of the 5 components of personality is supported by years and years of correlational research, primarily correlational research. Not much experimental research has gone into this, but lots of correlational research. So surveys like the one I just demonstrated, as I mentioned, interviews with friends and family, and just observations of people's behavior. These things tend to correlate. So people who say, I am the life of the party, I don't mind being the center of attention, then if you do an observational study and you just see how they behave in certain environments, they tend to be the more extroverted types. These things tend to be positively correlated. And we can observe that through correlational research. So that's the point of correlational research. And if you're interested in personality research, this course is not going to be about psychology or personality per se, but if you're interested in learning more about that, you can just Google the 5-factor model of personality if you want to learn more about that.